My speech starts now. Thank you, Chairperson. We would like to introduce two extensions. Number one, this forced marriage exacerbates polarization between rich and poor, which directly clashes with the closing government. Secondly, who is responsible for socioeconomic disparity? I would like to present our conclusion to this question. Rebuttals to the other side of the house will be incorporated into each extension. Number one, how this forced marriage exacerbates division conflicts between rich and poor people. 3 levels of analysis. Number one, poor people's sense of inferiority is reinforced. Human beings' sense of well-being is generated in relation with other people. When poor people are constantly exposed to life of rich people every day, their sense of misery will go worse. Sense of inferiority is stimulated in daily basis. It's similar to how people admire others in Instagram, as gorgeous aspect of life is exaggerated. For example, in the office, in the workplace, rich people are managers, director, vice president, and all the poor people are contractors or subcontractors. In shopping, like a boutique of Gucci and Louis Vuitton and Christian Dior will be open in this kind of area, but the only affluent people and rich people will enjoy shopping. Affordable goods do not exist in high-edge brand. Therefore, poor people can never enjoy shopping or daily life on the same basis. On communal level, disparity is highlighted and hatred and hostility is accumulated. Secondly, micro-internal discrimination will happen. We would like to challenge opening government. Rich people and poor people will never access the same facility anyway, because rich people will send their kids to private school. There's no incentive for rich people to send their kids to public school, and only poor people will send their kids to public school. Therefore, educational improvement will never happen. In terms of transportation, the rich people will use taxi or own their own vehicles and cars, while poor people will use public transportation. There will be cheap supermarkets and rich supermarkets. So they will intentionally avoid interacting with each other inside the same community. This is already happening in Harlem in New York or Roppongi, my neighborhood. Already people avoid each other, but invisible segregation will be eventually visible segregation. Teenagers, children grown up in these circumstances will never gain mindset to accept diversity and differences, which damages future democracies. Enemies are always in front of their eyes. So this kind of interaction is very dangerous and jeopardous. Number 3, local politicians will sensationalize socioeconomic divisions in politics. Republican politicians will advocate for policies in favor of rich residents because they can get votes and financial donations. And radical conservatives use kind of rhetoric that our society is under threat. We have to protect ourselves from invasion of the poor people. For example, the possession of gun will be advocated to protect themselves from savage criminals, or decreasing residential tax. Maybe they will pay less attention to welfare and social livelihood protection. So Prime Minister explained that rich people won't leave the area, therefore they have incentive to defend their communities from the invasion of aliens, while Democrats and liberal politicians will advocate for the opposite policies. So every election, socioeconomic division is overly sensationalized, which undermines incentive of residents to make any concession and compromise their interests. It's going to be harder to reach any social consensus. For example, as a case study, in Paris in France, different racial and ethnic group creates ghetto in one area, Muslim housing, Nigerian immigrant housing, or rich artist housing all in vicinity. Peaceful and amicable symbiosis is never achieved. Race war and hate crime is the consequence. Even armed gated community is constructed, which damages the security that closing government is caring about. Sadly, similar kinds of problems are happening in Korean town in Osaka and Chinese town in Tokyo. So conclusion, this kind of a polarization hurts the poor people even more socially and mentally. Forced marriage damages the weaker side. Even if in the current situation, poor people live in different area and rich people live in different area, that kind of segregation is much better rather than forcing them all mixed together and increasing hostility and hatred. Before moving on to my point, I would like to take point from opening government.
So if poor people can access to schools with better facilities, isn't it better than living in slum? your side of the house?
Okay, even if it is totally necessary to provide better facility to poor people, it's a different policy and it's a different topic. This is a debate about mandating developers to provide housing, so we should directly allocate resources for improving poor people's residential facility, and that's gonna be a direct solution, which has nothing to do with this topic. Finally, who's responsible for socioeconomic disparity? This is a question that opening half was discussing. But this debate is not about whether companies are responsible or government is responsible. This is a debate about degree of responsibility. So we would like to prove why developers are already fulfilling reasonable level of responsibility, thereby demanding more is unjustifiable and double exploitation. So number one, developers are contributing to economy by creating employment. When you construct buildings, a lot of blue collar laborers are necessary. So a lot of jobless people or low income class people are hired and gain income. So developers are already making a lot of social and economic contribution. Secondly, developing certain area means companies are organizing infrastructure such as water, electricity, Wi-Fi, road, and so on. This kind of large-scale organization is substantially similar to public enterprise. And stability of areas created, which reduces the crime rates in those areas. This is a lot of contribution. For example, in Las Vegas, it used to be desert, sand, nothing was there, but developers created and generated the value of the land out of nothing, and this is already considered a lot of contribution. And finally, these developers are paying a lot of corporate tax to the government, which is much higher than income tax. So what we'd like to discuss here is thereby demanding more is a double exploitation. These companies are fulfilling reasonable level of responsibility. So why is this important? Why is it dangerous that if the government demands these corporations more? Because this kind of policy is used as an excuse for government to ignore poor people and roll back all the welfare. Now government can say that, it's a responsibility of company and private sector to help poor people. It's not our responsibility. This is the kind of rhetorics that neoliberalism used. For example, when government privatize water, privatize prison, privatize any social state function to the market sector, state always abuses kind of rhetoric. It's a responsibility of market and private sector to do it, and state can roll back all the welfare money or all the livelihood protection. Currently, gentrification is done by government costs, but all this kind of gentrification policy should also have to be executed by the developers' responsibility, and it's a double exploitation. It's going to hurt poor people even more. We are happy to oppose. Thank you.